Greetings and salutations. This is Dad, aka Mike, and today I am again continuing at Dad Tells Your Story. So, in this video, we are continuing with this series of questions about siblings. And I left off the last one where we talked about the fishing trip to Paulskill Lake with my sister Anne Marie. So let us continue with just various stories and anecdotes and memories of my childhood growing up with my sister. So first memory that I jotted down, karate with Anne Marie. So as I had mentioned in other videos, Anne Marie and I were very, very close growing up. And there was always I guess, a competitiveness between us, sibling rivalry, but really not bad, but there was a little bit there. So I think I was a sophomore in high school and she was a freshman, and she came home one night after dinner and she said, I went down to the Ishinru karate place, and it was right down on downtown Newton. It wasn't far to walk. And she said, I joined karate. And I'm like, what do you mean you joined karate? She's like, yeah, I joined karate. I'm a white belt. And I'm like, there is no way I'm going to let my little sister join karate and not do it myself. So the following week, I went down with her. And it's funny because we signed up for karate, and my parents were like, you can do it, but you're paying for it. You want to do karate, you pay for it. And I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was they charged us $5 a week or whatever it was. It really wasn't that much money. Or, no, it was a lot of money, whatever the amount was. And I just remember maybe for the first couple of weeks, Anne Marie and I at least I remember paying. But then it came a point where the people that were running the karate place, I mean, they knew me, they knew Anne Marie, they knew our family. They just either stopped asking for money or I stopped volunteering it, because I did karate from sophomore, junior up through my senior year. So I did karate for like 3 years, and Anne Marie did it as well. And I just didn't pay for it a lot. So I went from white, yellow, green, orange, blue, purple. So I went up to purple belt, and I think, I'm not sure if Anne Marie made purple belt as well. She might have, but I just remember growing up, like, that was the thing that Anne Marie and I did. We would practice together. We would practice sparring together. There's pictures of us growing up in our gis, doing karate moves and stuff. So I just remember that was always something very special that Anne Marie and I did together. We did karate together, we practiced together, and that was a thing. I have summer at Dolan's pool with huge tubes. So my parents lived next door to a family called the Dolans. He was a lawyer. I think she was a stay-at-home mom. I actually don't know if she worked or not. But they had like 5 kids, and they were all much older. I mean, some of the Dolan girls actually would babysit me, Tammy, and Anne Marie growing up. And, like I said, they were much older. They lived right next door, and they were rich. And they had a huge in-ground pool right next to our property. So there was our property. There was this little driveway that would go to the parking spaces for other houses, and then they had this huge garage, and then in between their huge garage and their house was this massive in-ground gunite pool. It was a beautiful pool, diving board. There was a cabana. I mean, it was really nice. And my parents were friends with them, and my parents also volunteered to help clean the pool. We've painted the pool over some summers when they drained it and it had to be painted. So we had unrestricted access to this pool growing up. And add on to the fact that my dad worked, I think I had said he worked at a place called Sussex County Battery Station, and he would always could bring home big truck inner tubes, for playing in the pool. So we always had tons of inner tubes, and there was a diving board. So we would spend our summers swimming in this swimming pool. And like I said, we had unlimited access, night swimming. Oh, we thought it was the greatest thing in the world after dinner on a summer night because we didn't have air conditioning in the house to go up there and cool off in the pool. Oh, it was just wonderful. Wonderful memories of me, Tammy, and Anne Marie spending our summers at the neighbor's pool. And then, if that was in the summer, wintertime was Christmas with my sisters. I have Halloween down here, but I'm wondering if I already talked about Halloween. Oh yeah, I did. I did talk about Halloween. Okay. Well, anyway, I don't think I talked about Christmas. Um, I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this. Christmas time, from the time that my first recollections of Christmas up and through maybe a 5 or 6, my parents would not set up the Christmas tree until we went to bed on Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve, me and my sisters would go to bed, and we're laying in bed, thinking we hear Rudolph on the roof and Santa's coming and the whole bit. We were totally bought into Santa. And my parents would set up the Christmas tree and decorate it and get out all the gifts and make sure they were wrapped and they were underneath the tree. So Christmas morning, we're like dying to get up. And we'd get up and walk downstairs and real quiet, and we'd see the Christmas tree and all the presents, and it was just a magical moment. And Christmases were always wonderful because my parents didn't have a lot, but they always made sure that we had a wonderful Christmas. We got toys, we got games, and we would spend Christmas mornings playing games, playing the toys that we got, whatever it was, they would participate, and it was always a magical time. People talk about Christmases being awful in their house and family fighting or whatever, and it was never that case. Christmases were always very special with me and my sisters. I talked about Halloween already, so I don't have to go back into that. Freckles and Jamie. So growing up, we had two dogs. The first dog that we got was named Freckles, and I looks like maybe I was 5 or 6 when we got him, and he was just a rambunctious dog. The dog did not like to be in the house, and you could not let him off the leash. He would run away, and there were many times where he got loose and would run through the neighborhoods and get into mud puddles, and he would just come back home just a mess, caked with mud and everything. Now, I have no idea what happened to that dog. The family lore is he was sent off to a farm where he could run and play and have fun. And for all I know, that's true. Or he could have got a bullet to the back of the head someplace and was in a hole. Who knows? I really don't know what happened to Freckles, but he didn't stay in our house very long, and we got rid of him. And then it was maybe a few years later when we got Jamie. So we were older, we could help take care of a dog, and somebody was giving away this dog, and we brought her home, and actually it was my father that named her Jamie. And that was the family dog. She was kind of a mix of, she had some German Shepherd in her, maybe she had a little collie, maybe a little lab. But she was a sweet dog. She was very, very sweet. We loved her to death. And just me and my sisters would have the greatest memories of playing with Jamie and snuggling with her on the beanbag chair. And, you know, the epitome of a great house dog. Jamie and the garage door. So I have often said that, my dad was strict. Yeah, he didn't let us get away with a lot. And on the plus side, it helped shape us to be upstanding citizens and good adults and stuff like that. So there was a positive to it. Of course, at the time, I didn't like it. But this one time, every night around 7:30 to 8 o'clock, my dad would say to me, go out and bring in Jamie. Make sure you close the garage door, right? So the garage door was open. Jamie was an outside dog. She did not like to spend her time inside the house. She only came in to eat at dinner time. She would come in and eat and spend dinner with us and go back out. And she spent all of her days outside. She was chained in the backyard. She had a place to sleep, and that's what she liked. So anyway, 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'd go out, get the dog, bring her in, close the garage door. Well, one night I forgot to close the garage door. So went out and got her, brought her in. I went up to bed, let's say around 9 o'clock, and probably like 10:30, my dad wakes me up and he says, Michael, wake up. You didn't close the garage door. Get up. Go close the garage door. So I'm half asleep. I get up, go downstairs, walk outside, and I remember walking to the area where Jamie was, and I'm clapping my hands, going, "Come here, Jamie! Come here, girl!" And my father yells out from the kitchen, "Close the garage door!" So I close and then I realize, oh, I'm not here to get the dog. I'm just here to close the garage door. So close the garage door, come in the house, and my dad said, maybe next time you won't forget to close the garage door. And I go up to bed, and it wasn't the end of the world, but sure enough, I never forgot to close the garage door after that. Yeah, I bring this story up. One, it was just something to share from my childhood, and although my sisters weren't involved, they were involved in insofar as, my dad was tough, and he made sure that if we were told to do something, that we did it and we did it right, and so on and so forth. And I remember a follow-up story about 6 months later. My parents were actually with the Dolans, and one of their sons, Bobby, was I don't want to say a troubled young man, but he was probably troubled insofar as he was constantly getting into trouble, getting suspended at school, being disruptive at school. There was always a story about Bobby Dolan, and doing something wrong, negative, harmful, got in trouble, whatever. So my father is saying this story to the Dolans about, getting me up at night and having me go out and close the garage door. And I remember my dad telling us that Mrs. Dolan, I think her name was Carol, she started to cry. And my dad looked at her and he goes, "Oh, what's the matter?" And she's like, if we had done that to Bobby, he might not be this way, like instilling a little discipline. So whoever is listening to this, if you have children someday, you can love your children and be tough on them at the same time. You don't have to be your child's best friend. So I know I'm a father, and I look at my life with my children, and I know that I have made some mistakes, and I hope that not everything that I did that was perceived as being harsh turned out to be harsh. I hope there was some positive stuff in there. Okay. Getting in trouble and getting pulled downstairs. So this is definitely a sister story. I don't remember what the event was, but there was my sisters and I were in the house, and there was some reason why the three of us got into trouble, and my father, in a fit of anger, came chasing after us. And me and Tammy and Anne Marie ran through the kitchen, and he was hot on our heels. And I was the first one to run through the room where the stove is, and around towards the front door, and hit the stairs and run up. And I was the first one to hit the stairs, and my sisters were right behind me. And as I started to run up the stairs, my sisters grabbed me and held on to me and kind of pulled me back. And they climbed over me to get up the stairs. And my father then got a hold of me, and they escaped. And I think I got my ass beat because he was the only one that he could catch, and my sisters ran to safety. And they will never let me forget the time that they climbed over me on the stairs, and I got my ass beat. It wasn't like horrible, but anyway. Going to church on Sunday and bringing up communion. So every Sunday, my sisters and I were raised Catholic, and I remember, we'd have to get dressed up. My sisters always wore little dresses, and going to Catholic Mass, which we hated. Oh, it was the most boring thing in the world. Sit, stand, kneel. My father would inevitably, doze off during the homily. But the one highlight of church that we thought was awesome was if we got picked to bring up the gifts. So the gifts meaning, the bread, wafers, and the water and the wine. They'd have a little tray set up, and one of the ushers would always hint to my father, "Hey, you guys want to bring up the gifts this morning?" And be like, "Yeah." So they would let us get the gifts and walk up and give them to the priest. So we always thought that was just the greatest thing in the world, and it made actually being in church more tolerable. The garden, all the work, peas, beans, and more. So, being the frugal parents that my parents were, and not having a lot of money, one of the things that we did to get by was my father had a beautiful garden behind the garage and an area between the back of the garage and a fence. So it was a good sized garden, and he'd have a rototiller, and every spring he'd get out there and he'd rototill the garden. And of course, we're out there helping him. Three kids, there's three workers. We'd go to farms and shovel manure out of the cow pens, and spread the manure on the garden and use it as fertilizer. So whatever my dad did in the garden, his three helpers, me and my two sisters, were always there. So it was from springtime through the growing season, through the summer, and through harvest. My father had three of us out there working the garden in some capacity, whether it was go water the plants because we haven't had rain, go weed the garden because the weeds are coming up. And then there's time to pick stuff. So a lot of times my dad would not let his children pick the vegetables, whether it was peas or beans or corn or collard, whatever he grew. And he grew beans and lettuce and spinach and tomatoes and peas and corn and radishes and peppers. And I mean, he grew tons of stuff, and he would rotate crops and everything. So he would go out there and pick bushels of beans. And I just remember me and my two sisters sitting on the screened in porch, or sitting on even before it was screened in, cutting beans. And you'd cut the ends off, and then he had to have beans cut slanted. They couldn't be straight up and down. He wanted them like almost like a French cut, I think they call them. They were slanted cut. And the time that we would spend cutting beans and peas, pinch the end, pop it open, scoop out the peas, throw the husk, the pod in a bag, and put the stuff in the compost, save the peas afterwards. My mom would freeze everything. We would eat some and freeze the rest. So we would always eat homegrown veggies during the summer, and then of course we would have stuff freezed. But I just remember me and my two sisters every single summer for the longest time, that for as long as I've been in that house growing up, working that garden. And it was like not slave labor, me and my two sisters, but you ask them, hey, what was it like growing up with the garden? And they'll tell you the stories of cleaning vegetables, beans, freezing them, the whole bit, soup to nuts, the garden. Chores, kitchen, cleaning, wood, poop, etc. So in the Kimball household, there was definitely a segregation of duties between male and female. So my sisters had their jobs and I had mine. So my jobs year round was picking up dog poop. That was a task all in and of itself. That was my job, picking up after Jamie. During the winter time, I would have to bring wood in from the woodshed and stack it we had a big whiskey barrel in I guess it's called like the family room where our stove was. Filling up the wood every night. I have to bring in wood. Anything outside, my dad would have a man job or a boy job. I was doing it. And my sisters, I know Anne Marie, her responsibility was cleaning the bathrooms. That was her job. And her and Tammy would have to clean the kitchen every night. So after dinner, there'd be dinner, there'd be a dessert, there would be coffee, and everybody would clear the kitchen. My father would go sit in his chair and read the paper. My mother would go do something, maybe start to help the girls put like the food away. But then it was Tammy and Anne Marie who are responsible for dishes, and they would clean the dishes, load the dishwasher, whatever it was. They would clean the dishes, and there, so my sisters and I always had responsibilities. We always had chores, and most of them were always segregated by the girls do one thing and the boy does the other. Interesting, right? Growing up. Family vacations and pop-up camper. So, I've often said my parents didn't have a lot, but they kind of did because they didn't splurge on anything that wasn't necessary, but they were savers. And, my dad did get vacation time every year. And in order to go on a vacation and to be able to do it as cheaply as possible, they invested in a used pop up camper. And then eventually the pop up camper became the Scotty. It was a single axle, like Scotty trailer. And we towed that pop up camper to Florida, to Disney World. We've towed that camper to various campsites down the Jersey Shore and Cape May, and then we had the camper, which was a huge step up from the pop-up. One, it had AC. Two, it had heat. The beds were pretty comfortable. I slept in a little shelf pull out like bunk that was above the table, and my parents had a bed that was a couch that pulled down to a table, and then there was a bunk that Tammy and Anne Marie slept in, and they were small, but for a child, they were enough that you could get up there and sleep. And I mean, just I could tell story after story after story of the vacations that we took as a family and the fun that we would have together. We really did know how to have fun together as a family, and me and my sisters knew how to have fun together. It was wonderful, the family vacations that we took. Okay, guess what? I'm at 21 minutes and I haven't finished the second page of Siblings. So I'm going to make that another video. I'm going to put my little bookmark here. And yeah, I have a whole nother page of stuff to talk about when it comes to siblings. But for now, I will leave this at this. Thank you for watching. As the kids say, like and subscribe. And I will have another video in another week or so. So take care and goodbye.